Emily and I'm Gressenhall's Events Officer. Today I'm delighted to welcome Bob Lever, Gressenhall's apple enthusiast, to talk to you today about his favourite apples.
This apple is a Norfolk apple named Admiral. Given it's from Norfolk and given its name, you might have thought that it was in honour of Horatio Nelson, but actually this isn't the case. This apple was actually named after a Japanese admiral named Togo. Togo was an interesting chap. He was born in 1848 and he trained initially to be a samurai warrior. At the age of 17 he joined the Satsuma Navy and he was one of a number of Japanese cadets who were sent to Britain to further their naval training. During his time in Britain he served on the British training ship Hampshire, on which he circumnavigated the globe, travelling something like 30,000 miles. He later returned to Japan, and after a few years he was given command of his first ship. He proved to be a very able battle commander and eventually rose to become the commander-in-chief of the Imperial Japanese Navy. He was a very famous chap in his time and quite an interesting guy. He kept his journals in English, and he actually said, he wrote, "I firmly believe I am the reincarnation of Horatio Nelson." And in fact, his nickname in the Western newspapers was the Nelson of the East, of which I think he'd probably be rather pleased. Two apples for the price of one this time, Norfolk Royal and Norfolk Royal Russet. Norfolk Royal, classic bright red shiny apple, found as a sapling in Mr. Wright's nursery in North Walsham, about 1908 or thereabouts. Roll on 70 odd years and another Mr. Wright, this time a Reverend C.E. Wright, living at Burnham over Staithe, had a Norfolk Royal tree and discovered that some russet apples were growing on it. This is actually what we call a bud sport, and this is when one single bud on a tree undergoes a genetic mutation. Basically it's a mistake in copying the chromosomes, and the branch that grows out of that bud carries on with the altered genome. Consequently, it formed this little russet apple, Norfolk Royal Russet. And in fact, Norfolk Royal Russet has probably become more popular than the original Norfolk Royal. Norfolk Royal is quite a greasy apple, and it's sweet, but not a terribly interesting flavour, whereas the Norfolk Royal Russet has a nuttier and altogether more interesting flavour. It's quite resistant to disease, and it received in the 1990s an award of garden merit from the Royal Horticultural Society, which has made it quite popular with nurserymen. This nice healthy young tree is full of Norfolk Beefings. The first record of the beefing was at Mannington Hall, now home to the Walpoles, but at the time in 1698 when it was recorded in a fruit list there, it would have been the Potts family in residence. Now there's been some argument over the years about the origin of beefings. The eminent Georgian nurseryman Hugh Ronalds spells it in a French fashion, calling it Norfolk Beaufin, whereas in the Victorian period, Robert Hogg, a very eminent pomologist, describes it as beefing and says that it gets its name because it looks like beef. Norfolk beefing does look very similar to a heritage French variety called Coeur de Boeuf, or ox heart. Some people call it Norfolk biffin, but technically a biffin is something that is made from a beefing. In the 19th century, Norfolk biffins were an incredibly popular confectionery. The bakers of Norwich used to pack these apples in straw, put them between plates of iron and cook them very, very gently in the cooling bread ovens. The tough skin of the beefing means that the baked apples didn't split. they remained whole, and they were packed in boxes and sent to the London markets. I have seen an advertisement in the London Morning Post from the 4th of January 1820. Dried Norfolk Beefings, 1 shilling to 1 shilling and 6pence per dozen, in boxes, from 15 to 20 dozen, carriage paid, to London. Those at a shilling a dozen are of excellent quality. Enclose a £1 note and the change will be returned with the box. And that was James Gidney of St Stephen's, Norwich. As I said, the Norfolk Beefing and Biffins in particular, were incredibly popular. So popular that Charles Dickens actually describes them in A Christmas Carol. Norfolk Biffins, squab and swarthy, setting off the yellow of the oranges and lemons, and in their great completeness of their juicy persons, urgently entreating and beseeching to be carried home in paper bags and eaten after dinner. This is the Harvey apple, sometimes called Dr. Harvey or just even plain Harvey. First recorded, as far as we know, by John Parkinson in 1629. The first connection of the Harvey apple with Dr. Gabriel Harvey was made about 20 years later by John Ray, who was a fellow of Trinity College. So who was Dr. Gabriel Harvey? Well, he was a fellow of Trinity. He was a notable Elizabethan writer and scholar. He was, by all accounts, quite pedantic and quite argumentative, and he spent a great deal of his life in a feud with the poet Thomas Nash. Dr. Harvey was a great wordsmith, and he's actually given us quite a few words. Jovial was first coined by Harvey, conscious and notoriety and idiom, all words that Gabriel Harvey supposedly invented. Now, when Ray wrote about this apple, he described Harvey as the inventor of this apple, and it's been grown throughout East Anglia. We don't actually know where it was raised. Could be Saffron Walden, could have been Cambridge. Dr. Harvey the apple is capable of making very large and long-lived old veteran trees. Indeed, there used to be one standing in this orchard just a few yards from here. Unfortunately, it died a few years ago, but it was probably one of the original trees that were planted when the orchard was first established here on the old workhouse graveyard.